Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. And this is the third in a series of programs that we've had over the past few weeks on Hopkins and Baltimore. And last week, for those who were able to be here, it was an opportunity for a dialogue of people who grew up and lived and live in East Baltimore and in the shadow of Hopkins. This week is an opportunity to highlight three really fabulous programs. And we do that for two reasons. One, because in and of themselves, they're fabulous. But two, because one of the things that characterizes Baltimore is that there are numerous fabulous programs. And these are three of the best, but there are many. And the really central message is that there are a large number of people here who are passionate and working day in and day out to improve the health and well-being of this community. And so what we thought to do is provide a few snapshots. So we'll start out with a presentation on the Incentive Mentoring Program. The Incentive Mentoring Program was conceived and developed by Sarah Heminger. Sarah, and I suspect or trust that she will tell more of the story, and if she doesn't, I will ask her to, was pursuing her PhD in biomedical engineering when she was driving on the way to Hopkins, and her car stopped at a red light in front of Dunbar High School. The work that she, and now together with an extraordinary collection of over 500 volunteers, most whom are from Hopkins, is a story of what is possible when one person has a vision and has the will and focus to carry out that vision. I will introduce the others in turn. So I would say that Sarah did go on to complete her PhD, and however, has also gone on to lead the Incentive Mentoring Program in what really is an extraordinary national model. So let me welcome you, Sarah, and turn it to you. And I have your presentation here. So I think we will be good to go. Is that a self-portrait?
Yes, it is. On a bad hair day. So thank you for having me today. I'm actually excited about the opportunity to share with you what the Incentive Mentoring Program is and how it came to be. So the program has been around since 2004, but the idea for IMP actually started almost 18 years ago when I was a freshman in high school. My first day of school, met this guy. He was sitting in the teacher's seat. We had this huge fight about where he was and was not allowed to sit, and very quickly became friends. And as we became friends, I would hear rumors about him, and they weren't typical rumors. I grew up in Indiana, and where I grew up, these are not the types of things you would hear, that his mom was a drug addict, his dad was in prison. But when you're 14 years old and there's a guy that you have a crush on who's a senior, you're a freshman, you don't really want to walk up to him and say, "So is your mom a drug addict?" It's a little bit of an awkward conversation. So over many months, as I got to know him even more, I came to understand he was a varsity athlete. He was a straight-A student, and he was getting ready to go to the Naval Academy. And eventually, he decided to share with me what those rumors really were all about. And what had happened was 6 years earlier, when he was in junior high, his mom was in a really bad car accident. She was temporarily paralyzed, so she couldn't work, so she ended up losing her job. When she lost her job, they eventually then lost their house. They had to move from suburbia into Section 8 housing in the inner city, and she became very depressed and addicted to the painkiller Dilaudid, which she then began not just abusing, but selling, which then spiraled out of control into her selling everything from heroin, crack cocaine, you name it, she was selling it, and basically running a prostitution ring out of their living room. And so because of that, he failed every single one of his classes his freshman year of high school and missed more than 30 days of school and was basically going to drop out. And he's telling me this story, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't understand. My 14-year-old brain just couldn't quite comprehend, how did you go from straight Fs to straight As? How did you fail your freshman year and then end up at the Naval Academy? It just didn't all add up for me. And so he explained that there were two things. The first was there was this incredible group of teachers who basically said, all right, this is a child whose most basic human needs are not being met. And so they would give him rides to school. They would give him food. They would buy him clothing. They helped keep the electricity on in the winter. They didn't just say to him, like, work harder, you can do it. You know, they actually got in the trenches and said, okay, what is it we need to do to make it easier for you to make better decisions? And then the second part of it was that he just decided to make better decisions. But they really supported him in doing that, and that fundamentally changed his life. Now, at the time when I was 14, I didn't really comprehend, I think, still what it really meant, what the teachers had done and the intervention that they had had. But what I did understand was that he was the most incredible person I had ever met. Anyone who could live in that situation and really thrive and come out of it ahead was someone that I figured I would want to spend the rest of my life with. And so we dated. We got engaged, finally got married, and we've now been married for more than 13 years. So what happened was he went out to the Naval Academy. 3 years later, I came out to Hopkins as an undergrad, mostly because it was near the Naval Academy, which is probably not how you're supposed to choose your school. And it was like the entire experience was completely wasted on me. I was very self-focused. I essentially had a master checklist of all the things I was going to do, what degree I was going to get, what internship, what house I was going to buy, the guy I was going to marry. And I spent 4 years masterfully checking things off that list, and then found myself back at Hopkins in graduate school at 23, having got the degree I wanted to get, joined the sorority I wanted to join, got the house, the guy, the whole, and I was basically out of things to check off my list, and I was completely miserable. And it was that kind of miserable that you don't really know how to explain why you're so miserable, because you sound like a spoiled brat, like, oh, things are just too good, like it's just not going well. But the truth was I was absolutely lonely, and I didn't have a lot of family in the area other than my husband. At the time, biomedical engineering grad students had to take the first year of medical school. I was with all these med students. I had no clue what I was doing. I had not taken biochem, so I was struggling academically, and I really was just feeling alone. And that's when I was actually stopped at that street corner at Caroline and Orleans. And obviously, I don't think epiphanies are things that happen right in the moment. They're things that build over time. But the thought that I had was, it was like for the first time I actually saw the high school. Like I had never even noticed there was a high school there. And I noticed Dunbar, and then I looked across the street and I noticed there was the public housing. And as soon as I noticed those two things, it's like, once my eyes were open, they were really open. I noticed Hopkins right in front of me. And the astounding things that came to my mind weren't, oh, there's this huge difference between the two worlds. I mean, that was obvious. But the strange thing that came to my mind was I actually thought I was more likely to form relationships and find friends in the high school than actually at Hopkins. Like, I found that I felt more likely to bond with high school students that I thought as being like my husband than the students at Hopkins. And so that's actually how IMP started. It didn't start as some, mission to go save inner city kids. That's really not what we're about. It started because I was absolutely miserable and lonely, and I was trying to save myself, and that was my best effort. And to this day, that's really how we operate. So we talk about it as though everyone is a mentor and everyone is a mentee. So the students that we work with, we really view it as a mutual relationship where we're coming together to grow together. And so what we do is we enroll students that are exactly like my husband. During their freshman year of high school, they're failing all their classes. The average GPA of our last incoming cohort was 0.8 on a 4.0 scale. They're generally truant, so they've missed more than 20 days of school and have some behavioral challenges in the classroom. Those are kind of our prereqs. After finding students that meet those prereqs, we then interview them to assess challenges outside of the classroom, so living in poverty, sometimes living without electricity, water, to being in a gang, dealing drugs. We have students that range from so severely depressed they can't get out of bed to 4 felony arrests at the age of 14. And then what we do is we basically replicate what the teachers were to my husband Ryan, and we give each student, so kind of click through, we give each student an extended family of support. So there's as many as 8 volunteers who become the IMP family of that student, who are there to do everything. I mean, it's basically a do whatever it takes mentality. And I think more than do whatever it takes, it's do whatever it takes as relentlessly as you need to. So once students are in IMP, they can't get out, and it's an 8-year program. So they're given this family of volunteers who do all of those things: the rides to school, the packed lunches, the tutoring, the SAT prep, the summer jobs, the college prep, the health services, the legal services. But they do it in a way that you just never give up on a kid. And so once they're in, they can't get out. And then what we do to create, since you have kids for 8 years, if we take consecutive cohorts, you imagine there's 8 years of kids at one time. A lot of times the best person to mentor a student is someone who's been there. So like Delante, who's at Purdue, who maybe used to be doing some things in Cherry Hill he shouldn't have been doing. He's the best person to speak to. Dante, who's in a similar situation, lives in the same neighborhood, and can say to him, hey, this can look different, and this is how it can look different. So what we do is we take each student, one student from each cohort, and their IMP family, and place them in a house. And this is our way of kind of taking what's brilliant about the gang culture and the sorority culture, 2 things I'm fascinated with. So in each house, you would have a college senior, college junior, college sophomore, college freshman, all the way down to a high school freshman. So there's peer-to-peer mentoring within the houses, both for the students and for the mentors. And then in addition to the houses, what we've learned is that you can have 30 Hopkins students in a house that have IQs of over 150. But if your kid's getting evicted and no one in that house is a lawyer and no one's ever been evicted, you still have 30 inexperienced people who are ignorant regarding that particular situation. And to avoid people going and sitting down at legal aid for 5 hours at a time, reinventing the wheel, we've created 14 programs and services. So these were actually created by IMP volunteers to address kind of the sustainability aspect of our program and ensure that our students' needs are met. So if a kid's being evicted, their family members can just call the director of legal affairs, and what the director of legal affairs will do is they're going to connect them to the outside circle. So we might have a number of pro bono lawyers who exist on that outer circle who maybe don't feel comfortable driving to Cherry Hill, knocking on doors saying, hey, who needs legal services? But they are comfortable coming to a meeting with Hopkins students and then the student and their family. And so this is part of how we mobilize the resources of the city. So we believe in IMP that essentially all of the resources that we need in Baltimore exist, but the challenge is that they're not being utilized well, and part of why they're not being utilized well is things and people, resources and people exist in silos that aren't really communicating. And so what this serves to do is create a comfortable point of entry for different groups of people to communicate with one another and to grow together. We currently have grown now to have 2 sites. So we have a site at Dunbar High School and Hopkins East Baltimore, as well as Ace High School, which is in Hamden, and Hopkins Homewood. And our goal is to really continue to grow so that we begin to integrate these 2 sites and the resources that exist at them. We currently have both 2 sites. We have 95 students, over 500 volunteers, and now 5 staff. One of our staff members actually here, Kat. Kat can wave. So Kat is the program director. She actually runs this entire circle of IMP Resources. She's formerly a Hopkins Med student that, after graduating, came on board full-time as staff. And she can, if any of you guys are interested, she'll be around and she can talk to you about some of the opportunities to participate in IMP. But Kat and I are both 2 of 5 staff. So small and mighty on the staff end, but larger on the volunteer end. And that's why for us, volunteers are really so critical. And then to give you kind of a sense of our outcomes, so 8 years in, we've retained 100% of the students. So we've never lost a single student. It doesn't mean they don't try to leave IMP. It just means that we go after them and basically stalk them until they understand we love them and it's family and it's permanent. We have 100% of our students, even though they're the most underperforming when they come in, 100% of them have graduated from high school or gotten their GED. 100% have been accepted to college. 97% have matriculated to college. And our first cohort now, we've had 33% of them graduate from college and are on track to have, at the most conservative estimate, 66% of them receive 4-year degrees. So we've been able to see over the last 8 years just really what is possible. And what is possible is these non-traditional families that involve people like yourselves, like Hopkins students, Baltimore residents, community members, all coming together to enrich one another's lives. And I hope that if some of you are new to Baltimore coming in as students, that you'll find what opportunities there are in Baltimore to become engaged. There's so many, and IMP is one of them. So thank you. Did I stick to my 12 minutes?
The next is a presentation by 2 people who will talk as a tag team. And it is a presentation on a very community-based initiative here in East Baltimore, the Transformation Team, that really was the vision of Major Melvin Russell. Major Russell is the commander of the Eastern District Police for the Baltimore City Police Department. And for those who do not know, this is the Eastern District that we are in. He has served on the police force here in Baltimore since 1979. In addition to his role as a police officer, he is also an ordained minister. And in both of these capacities, he has seen firsthand many of the challenges that come with policing a complicated and at times violent neighborhood. Together with him is Reverend Donald Campbell. Reverend Campbell is the pastor of Moravia Assembly of God Church and has been a partner with Major Russell. And I think together we'll be able to give you a very good sense of what this unique and exciting program is all about. So let me turn it to you, Major Russell, and then Reverend, we'll go from
there. Well, listen, first and foremost, let me just say it's an honor, a privilege, and I am really pleased to be here on behalf of a special invitation by my friend, Dr. Robert Blum. you guys are so much brighter than I am. I always tell people, not always, but oftentimes you hear me say, people says, have you gone through Hopkins? I said, of course I went through Hopkins, you know, and I leave it there. They literally don't know that I rode through anyway. But listen, let me just give you a little bit of background just about myself and probably how I got to this point. So some of you may have raised an eyebrow when Dr. Blum had mentioned that I've been on since 1979, because I know a lot of you in here, probably the vast majority of you weren't even born then. But that's when I started my career in 1979, and some great dynamics have happened over the course of that time. In particular, I should tell you that when I started off my career, I started off patrol. I am a Baltimorean. I've gone through the Baltimore school system, 8 years of parochial school, graduated from Polytechnic, for those that are from Baltimore, which used to be the premier high school, whether you went to City or not. It used to be the premier high school in Baltimore City, but City is the one now, so I submit. But at this time, then I went off to college to a little small school called Florida Institute of Technology, because my love was, I was probably one of the only African Americans that grew up and would stay glued to the TV watching a show called Jacques Cousteau. Those of you that are too young, you don't have no idea what I'm talking about, but Jacques Cousteau, he studied the oceans, he was a marine biologist, and that's exactly what I wanted to grow up and do. So my best friend and I, we went off to college, and we were in that school, the Florida Institute of Technology, down in Jensen Beach, Florida. It only specialized in two things, and that was medical field and marine biology. And so we were there for marine biology, but being teenagers, as you will, we were goofing around one Saturday afternoon. Very small tank, narrow tank, but it was very deep, 25 feet deep. We would throw coins into it, race to the bottom, and race back up. And quite frankly, what happened was I won often those races. However, I ruptured my eardrums. To this day, I don't hear well out of one of my ears. And so what happened was that set me on a different goal, because a different career path, because I realized from the doctor's report I could no longer dive and swim the way I desired to swim. And I was the crazy one that wanted to swim with the whales, play with the great whites, and I told you I was a strange African-American child. But I wanted to do all those crazy things, and since I didn't want to be out at sea for 6 months at a time just studying the ocean on the vessel and couldn't be in the water, I came back a little depressed and dejected, and I had one of those old mothers and fathers that said, either you're in school or you're working, you will not be laying around this house. So I was taking odd jobs. Long story short, a police officer came along one day walking the beat and said, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And it was a profound question for me at the age of 19 at that time, because I had no idea what I was going to do. But I do know that my second career choice was going to be in law enforcement. Because you see, as I was also coming up, there was another favorite show that I used to watch, and I adopted that nickname. I was known that in high school and college, and that was Starsky. Starsky and Hutch, that's right. So that was my second career choice, so I thought about it, but I always thought if I go in law enforcement, it definitely wouldn't be in Baltimore City. But I would go out to California, drive the red car with the white stripe, and do all those wonderful things. But as a chance would have it, I went to Baltimore City Police Department and absolutely fell in love with the detectives, the police officers, pulling reports, watching what they did. And before I knew it, I became a police officer myself. As a matter of fact, I became the first and only, even up to this day, the first African-American valedictorian to graduate from the police academy. So I was on the street for several years, and then I got bitten by the drug bug. No, I didn't use drug. What I'm saying to you is this, that I went into drug enforcement. So I spent 20 years, and this is where I'm going with this story. I spent 20 years of my career. It'll be 33 years in October. I spent 20 of those years in narcotic enforcement. So I literally was working underground. I was doing a lot of undercover work. I was working across the country and other countries, and it led me to see a lot of things. But what it did do to me was disengage me from community. Even though I had a home in East Baltimore, even though I was worshiping East Baltimore, I was disengaged from the community. So I didn't see the dynamics that were starting to unfold and take place before my very eye. It wasn't until I came out of narcotics, really looking to retire, because I thought I had done enough. 27 years was long enough. Let me go on with the next phase in my life. However, something pulled me back in. I don't have time to get into that, but something pulled me back in. And so while I was back in patrol for the first time in 20 years, wearing a white shirt, being a lieutenant, I drove down the streets of East Baltimore, and I noticed as I was driving towards a corner, there were some young men on a corner, and I realized 20 years before, I knew exactly what would happen as I pulled closer. But I pulled up on this corner, and nobody was moving. Well, 20 years previous to that, it was a lot of respect, mutual respect. You pulled towards the corners, guys got off the corner. They weren't moving off the corner. I parked my car, got out of the car, they weren't moving off the corner. I approached them, still perplexed, what's going on? not only were they not walking off the corner, but they were now asking me a question, what do you want? And I thought, wow, there's a great disconnect. The public and even our young people on the street don't connect and don't respect the police like they used to. And I began to look at my surroundings, and I realized the system as far as police community, that famous quote that we often use, really was not so. It was just a phrase at this time. And so I thought to myself, wow, this is a little bit different. So I began to police in a little bit different way, and we began to build bridges back. Quickly began to mold my officers and show them how we used to do it back in the day and how we really did engage our community, and you just weren't a 911 responder. And things began to change, and they took notice from the bosses, and before I knew it, I was promoted in about 11 months or 8 months, and then I went somewhere else, and I came back because things began to change in that community, and that's actually where I met Pastor Don Campbell over in Northeast Baltimore, because we used to walk in the communities, engage our communities. I made my police officers respect people. But then I came back to East Baltimore as the commander, now my 4th tour of duty over here as the commander, police commander. And I realized now it was solely upon me, upon my shoulders, to reduce crime, because that's what a major is supposed to do, reduce the crime in your district. You fail and succeed by the crime reduction in your district. So I thought, wow, they have thrown me back into a district that has traditionally been the most violent, the worst district, the most impoverished community in all of Baltimore City, and now I am responsible to make this safer. And I've seen the majors, and I've seen them come and go, and I've seen the things they did, that some worked partially, a lot of it didn't work at all. And I thought, I want to do something different. So I began to seek a higher power, much higher than myself, and figure out what are we going to do. And I was quickly given a vision. And this is how I began my career in this quest of my phase of my life today. And I realized that what we need to do in this community is really pull people together. Because I realized there was a lot of great work being done in East Baltimore by a lot of different individuals and different groups, but it was all separate. And so I tagged it as a lot of separatism and division and isms and schisms. I mean from everywhere. I mean businesses weren't working with each other. Communities, I've got one community, there's no more than about 5 or 6 radius blocks, but they broke it and they segregated themselves, not so much of color, but because of beliefs. And they segregated themselves into 5 separate communities because they couldn't get along. And I watched this fragment throughout the district. I watched churches, one on every corner, and they weren't even talking to each other, nor had a desire to talk to each other or get together or fellowship or do anything for the community. So I saw this fragmented state of mind throughout the district, and I thought, this cannot be, and this is not the way we're going to solve the problem. So I always thought this, and I was always led to believe that reduction of crime would simply be a after or a byproduct of just us coming together. So what does that mean? I began to think that, you know what, if we, meaning the shareholders, whether you worked, played, whether you lived, or whether you just loved East Baltimore, if we begin to come together and pull our resources together, then we can make a difference. Then the crime will take care of itself. And I can remember back in January of 2000 or February of 2009, holding a first meeting where I called all the community leaders and all the shareholders of East Baltimore, and about 80 people to 100 people showed up. And we began to ask the question, what is wrong with this community, with our community? What's wrong with the district? You tell me. Because I wanted people to self-identify, and I wanted the issues to be not so much hidden. Because here's something, and Dr. King once said this, that silence is a betrayal. Silence is a betrayal, and I realized that people have gone back into their homes. People weren't speaking, and people was hear no evil and see no evil and speak no evil. No one was saying anything, and silence was a betrayal for their very communities because nobody was saying anything. They were watching each other get ravished and raped and robbed and plundered, and drug dealers were taking over entire communities, and nobody was saying anything. And I can remember 20 years previous to that, you couldn't sell drugs in the community and nobody not say anything. You couldn't rob another person in the community. You couldn't break into your neighbor's house and you living right next door and you not say anything. But that was the culture that the communities have now adopted. You couldn't curse in the middle of the street as a little boy and a little girl and nobody grabbed you by the ear and said, your mother, you know your mother and father don't want you talking like that. But yet it was the norm of the day. Silence was a betrayal to the communities. So we pulled people together and we began to ask them, what do you think is wrong with our communities and what needs to be fixed? And something unique started to happen. People began to self-identify themselves and identify situations in the community, what was wrong with the communities. People began to say things like, you know what, we have way too many vacant houses in East Baltimore. And you know what, they were right, because we have 40% of the vacant houses in East Baltimore, 40% of all of Baltimore City, they are right in East Baltimore. Other people used to begin to say things like, we have no businesses, no jobs in East Baltimore. All the businesses and the jobs are gone, and we need to get those back. And other people used to say, well, those that go to jail, they come back higher educated and being better drug dealers, better robbers and burglars, and we need to do something about that. So we went through this thing, and we ended up with about 9 or 10 categories of places where people self-identify what was wrong with East Baltimore, and then I began to look at that and really see that, you know what, that's probably the problem across the city. It's probably a national problem. We could probably go into any community and pick these same items out and say, these are problems in our communities. So we began to work together. We began to come together. And we began to take those individuals that were doing a great work and say, sit down and meet and talk to this individual and this group. And you also join up, because all of you have been doing a great work for years and years and years, but you have not been working together. You don't even know each other, because we all want to protect our little territory. We all want to outclaim the fame. We all want to get the credit. We all want to be able to say, look what I did. And we just want to take the I out of team and create a team. Create a team where the end goal is just to create a better Baltimore, create a better East Baltimore, because it only starts in East Baltimore. What we do is not something just for East Baltimore. We don't want to just hang on to it for East Baltimore. We don't want anybody to experience what we've experienced. We figured, let's just polish something in East Baltimore. And if it's successful, then we have a platform. We have a stage. We could talk to other parts of the city. We can go to other places that they're having issues also and say, we're not asking you to adopt what we did, but I think maybe we found some answers, and we just want to share those ideas with you. And if you want to take on those same ideas, we'd be willing to help you walk them out. So that's what we began to do. So the transformation team birthed. So we began to work with builders, and I used to go to builders, and I used to say, because all of a sudden there was investors coming into East Baltimore because some initiatives we started doing started making East Baltimore safer, and because the cost of buying property in East Baltimore became so bottomed out, it was a great place for an investment if they can just get their properties built up before they were ravished or robbed or burglarized. And so businesses began to come in, and I used to align myself, and I still line myself up with those that will partner with us. And I would say things like, listen, you don't really have to partner with me. I'm nobody. You're a businessman. We don't live in the same worlds. I'm charged with keeping the community safe. But if you want to be more, you want me and my officers to be more than a 911 responder to you, then I think it's good to go in business with us. So what does that mean? Let us know when you're at different stages of building your house, because it's a win-win situation. If you're putting wiring in your home, I need to let you know they still wiring, and I'm not telling you something you don't know. They still wiring around here, and bad guys are watching you as you build up these homes. So maybe if you tell us when you're putting the wiring in, because I can't protect everybody at the same time, we could do special attentions on your house at special hours. Maybe if you tell us when you're putting appliances in, and maybe I could tell you some safety issues. Stop putting appliances in your home and then leaving the windows not so much open but uncovered, so when people walk by they can see a brand new Whirlpool, a lot better than they got in their home. And then they come back the next day, or you come back the next day and it's gone. Why don't we work together so we can partner on this, and your investment could be a sound investment at the same time. I don't have to catch another burglary and answer to my boss is why I got another burglary problem in my district. Does that make sense? So we began to do things like that. So we began to work with all these different initiatives. We realized that we had issues because a young lady said, you know what, I don't know if you know it, Major Russell, but we got a health issue in East Baltimore. We've got one of the highest HIV ratings right here in East Baltimore, one of the highest tuberculosis, teen pregnancies right here in East Baltimore. Maybe we could start educating. Maybe we could start informing them. Maybe we could start bringing some attention to this. We can make this problem go away. And at one time we were number 2. And can I tell you today we're number 10 in East Baltimore because of the initiatives we have put together. I don't have time to go into it, but it's just because some like-minded people, including those at Hopkins, because I can remember going to Hopkins one day, well before I met Dr. Blum, going to Hopkins one day and used to say to some of the people I've talked to, and a lot of them are gone now and moved on, and said, you know, Hopkins, you have been the gorilla, and I'm just speaking to you from the community's perspective. You've been the gorilla in the room for so long. You've been that multi-billion-dollar organization that in the backyard of people that can't even afford to pay their rent. People that can't even work because they can't find jobs. And I'm just wondering, could we somehow make a partnership where we can give back to the community? And they began to open the doors. And even to this day, and I am so grateful for this, where they even came up with John Hopkins Health Institute came up with a wonderful program. And Dr. Blum, I just love this program, and I'm so honored to be a part of the board, the Community University Collaborating Committee, where they work with the community members and have a voice and looking to see how we can better partner with the communities. And so we've said that even about companies like EBDI that wiped out all those hundreds and thousands of homes in an 88-acre footprint. Why don't we work together? Because the community looks at you like you're the bad guy. You know what? You just kicked us out of here so you can get the real estate and build it back up. And so the community was hating on EBDI, and we said we need to build this relationship back. We don't need to be bumping heads. So we began to build that relationship back, and now we have a healthy relationship with the community and EBDI. So we had all these things going on, and we had things like what really touched my heart was the youth. I was seeing recreation centers being closed and programs shut down, and I was seeing more and more youth in the street, and I said, wow, what are we going to do with the kids? But that was brought to my attention well before I even noticed it, and somebody said, we need to do something with our kid. So we started doing fun things and doing strong initiative for our youth, both good and bad. Because how many know that, you know what, you can't, it's just like having kids at home. You can't just reward or give attention to the bad kids who need the attention, obviously, and need special attention at that. But you better make sure you're giving attention to those kids that have been doing right the whole time. Because children all yearn for attention, if it means I got to become bad, if it means I got to start failing to get attention, then maybe that's just exactly what I'll do if mom and dad won't give me that attention. And we looked at our communities the same way. So Sarah has a beautiful program, and we thought, you know what, we have to start giving attention not only to our kids that need that attention, but what about the kids that have been doing well? So we give them attention too. So we gather up our high school, Dunbar is one of them, and we've got some high schools and middle schools, and every year around the holidays we gather the brightest ones of each school, and we just take 2 days and we celebrate them. City government and our leaders get resolutions out. We celebrate them with dinners, an honor dinner where we have special people come through, actors and athletes and political figures, and they come through and just speak into their lives. We grab about 30 young people that have really done it excellent in East Baltimore. And then we take a day and we just allow them to go shopping because we pair up with Macy's and we give them $200 gift cards, and they really, really get something great out of that. So we give back to them and let them know what you're doing is absolutely the right thing. And if nobody else told you that, they appreciate your hard work and your hard effort. We appreciate it. And yeah, I might get some place like from IND, Institute of Notre Dame, have the brightest of the brightest. These girls were carrying averages that I didn't think were possible, 4.8. What is a 4.8 average GPA? I have no idea how you get to a 4.8, but they were giving me a listing. These are our top kids, 4.8, 4.7. I didn't know what that was. I thought 4U was a genius, so I guess you just off the charts at 4.8. But we had them. But then we would go to Dunbar, and we had kids with like a 3.2 average, and I would ask the principal and the teachers, why do we have kids with, tell me why they're so special with 3.2. And they would say, Major Russell, the reason you need to keep them on this list is because of this. Because, you know, their father is out of the picture, whether he be dead or in jail or whatever the case, or just didn't want to be a dad. But you know what? Their mom is a crackhead, or she's selling her body. She's not in the home, and this child is able to keep up this grade average. At the same time, he or she is raising their little siblings. They have a lot of burden on them, and they're still pressing, and they still got their head up. I said, bring that child to me. And we, you know what? We speak into that child and let them know it's going to get better, and then we put mentors around those children. So we do all these wonderful things to transform our community. And then we do wonderful things with the kids that aren't doing so well. And I'm just kind of focusing on the youth because the youth are important to me. Because I always say this, the youth are not our future. And I would look at them and I would get a stone cold or calmness or quiet, even some frowns in the room. No matter if I'm speaking before 5 of them or 500 of them. I said, youth, you are not our future. You're certainly not my future. And they will look, and I heard them get to the point, because I don't want them to jump up and start throwing tomatoes at me and stuff like that. But I heard them get to the point and say, you're not our future, but you're our now. Because we can't afford to wait until tomorrow. We need to invest in you right now. You are our now. And then all of a sudden they start smiling. Okay, all right, you cool. You cool. We ain't going to hurt you. But my point is, so we deal with also the worst of the kids. And something I never even realized that was happening as we were doing some things, and I'm not going to go into them, but violent prevention things, we try to help them. One of my biggest dreams is to have a gang summit, to call all the gang members of Baltimore City and to see if we could get them just to call a truce. I talk to them on a regular basis. They told me that can happen, but you know, you're going to need to be able to give us a couple of things, because most of us don't want to be in this gang lifestyle. Most of us don't want to be knocking people in the head and robbing them. But we still have to put food on our table, and we don't know any other way. Nobody else would give us a chance. So unless you can get us jobs, unless you can get us homes because our family members don't want us anymore, this is all we know to do. So if you can find a way for us, Major Russell, we'll work with you. And I can remember about 2 months ago now, coming up on 2 months ago, some young people, now after doing this for a couple of years, I remember trying to get out of my building, my office, and my secretary said, you got some people up front that want to see you. And I said, well, I don't have time. I'm on a tight schedule. But I stopped at the front desk, and my attention was caught because there were 3 young people, all tattooed up, definitely kids from the street, and said, Major Russell, we've been watching what you've been doing for the last couple of years. And I remember talking to Sarah, hearing Sarah a little bit earlier, and even Todd was saying this, you know, young people and people in general, it takes a while before you earn their trust. You know, because too often we whisk into their lives and whisk right back out, here today and gone tomorrow. And so we've seen what you've been doing for the last couple of years, and you're real, and we just want to know, is there any way we can partner with you? Partner with you and you partner with us. We want you to promote us and what we're trying to do, and we want to help you stop the beefing in the streets and actually promote you. And I wasn't so concerned about that, but I asked them, what is it that you've been doing, and what is it you want me to promote? They said, well, we have the capacity, because we have something called street creds. We have the capacity to pull gang members from across this city. Now, remind you, I've been trying to do this for years. We have the capacity to call them from different gangs like BGF, Black Guerrilla Family, from Bloods to Crips to Purple City Dipset, all the gang members that we have in the Baltimore City. We could call them together and actually fellowship together for hours on end, sworn enemies, and nothing bad would happen. They will break bread together, they will dance together, they will skate together, whatever format we have, nothing will happen for hours. They can get along. And what I would like to do is you help us with that and grow that to the next level. We don't even know what that means, but could you help us make that to the next level? And I began to think, I said, what would it look like for young people by the thousands to come from all over the city, come together and call a truce? What would that do to the media? What would it catch the media? And this is me talking to them. What would happen to the media? What would happen to our local government? What would happen to the police department if we saw our crime just plummet out because our young people represent so much of the crime? Would they not have a platform? Would they not have a stage? Would their voice not begin to get so loud? Would not people be able to have to stand up and say, my goodness, how were they able to do this? If the police department didn't take credit, if government didn't take credit. But if we pointed the finger back at them and said, they came together and did this because they chose to do it, because they want to show everybody they can do this. But now they're asking to have somebody help them out. So can we find jobs? Can we find programs? Can we find homes? Can we take a lot of these vacant homes and can we train them to fix up these homes and give them trade and turn a lot of these homes into maybe transitional homes or safe houses for them? Can we do things like that? Because if not, they're going right back to the behavior that they have been, because at the end of the day, they still have to put food on their table. So we have all these wonderful things going on, and a lot of people say, does it work? Let me tell you how well it works. In 2007, the year before I took over, there were 165 people. Understand that, and I'm going to get my pastor up here in a minute. Understand that the Eastern District, which we're in, as Doctor pointed out, is only 12-mile radius. It's one of the smallest. Central District and Eastern District are the smallest districts of all 9 districts that make up the city. 120 churches in this district, which I'll get to in a minute. But one of the smallest districts, but yet the most violent district. Every year, the most murders, the most homicides. 2007, 165 people affected by gunfire. Sounds like a war to me. 165. Of that, 50 of them were homicides in 1 year. So that leaves the remaining 115 were affected by gunshots, and they survived. I call them failed homicides. And again, we came in and immediately began to put some things in places. So by the end of the year, just being here 4 months, it went down from 165 to 127. And we began to do things I can remember because, as Doc pointed out, I am an assistant pastor, so I'm a man of faith, and I'm not ashamed to tell anybody that. And I can remember at the beginning of 2010 praying and say, God, you know what? This area has never, and I'm talking about East Baltimore, since I've been on this agency, I've never seen under 120, 30, 50, at its peak, 183 people affected by gunfire in East Baltimore, like a little war zone. I've never seen it at 100. Could you, for me, only allow 100 people shot and or killed in East Baltimore? And I completely forgot about that prayer in January of 2010. Until the end of 2010, when, as all majors, we begin to see how we did at the end of the year. And like any other corporation, you begin to see your pluses and your gains. And at the end of the year, can anybody even begin to think how many people were shot and or killed in East Baltimore? Just shout out a number. How many? 98. You must have. It was 99. 99. Blew me away. And I remember the fuss and everybody saying, oh my God, what's going on in East Baltimore? How'd you do that? That's never happened before. It was a fluke. Whatever you're doing, it was just a fluke. It'll never happen again. And I remember in 2011 saying, God, you know what? Everybody's saying this was a fluke. And we don't need the credit, but people need to know that this thing is real. Because everything we do, we're inspired by you. Everything we do. So could you do it again? One time, a fluke. Two time, something's going on. So at the end of 2011, the number went down to 87. People were just baffled how this was going on. And it was funny because in the beginning when I was called a kook and radical and everything else, now it's like, boy, we love you. I don't know what you're doing, but whatever you're doing, keep on doing it. Because from 50 homicides in 2007, now we were down to 25 homicides cut in half in a mere 3 years. From 115 people injured by gunfire was down to 87, I believe it was, in a mere 3 years. And you know what? We're not done yet. But I'm going to bring Pastor up now because my time is almost up. Pastor, I want you to make your way up. One of the biggest things I saw was this. Come on up, Pastor. Pastor Don Campbell. One of the biggest things I knew that we needed to do was, as I went around the communities and I saw 100 plus 20 churches, I realized that these churches weren't engaged. The businesses weren't engaged. Nobody was engaged. And I would fuss to my businesses like I did to my churches. I told my businesses, stop taking advantage of our impoverished people. You know these people can't get out of this community, so you sell a can of corn for $1.09? Really? A roll of toilet paper for $1.09? Really? You know if they can get in the car and go 3 miles to a decent market, they can get 3 cans for the price of your one. I'm not telling you you have to stop that, but if you want me to be your friend, I'm probably a good friend to have. If you want me to be your friend, you'll stop taking advantage of these people. And I want you to give back to the community. What do you mean give back? The reason you get so robbed all the time, the reason you get burglarized because people look at you as the enemy. You come into your fine car, you go back to the suburbs in your fine home, and you don't do anything for the community except bleed them dry. So when I'm trying to get the kids off the street and start little leagues and camps and stuff like that, or just throwing block parties so the community can feel good about themselves, can you please donate? Not making you, but it'd probably be here's the win-win situation. If the community begins to realize that you are donating back to the community, you won't get robbed. You won't get burglarized. And a lot of them laughed at me. But the few that bought into, all of a sudden, guess what? They weren't getting robbed. They weren't getting burglarized. You know why? Because if I'm a burglar, if I'm a robber, if I'm a drug dealer, and that's my territory, and I know now that you're giving back to the community, and the reason my little brother don't have to follow in my footsteps because he can now do some things because the community is wrapping some services around him so he don't have to be a drug dealer. He can actually live and not die. I'm going to make sure nobody touched it. Forget the police. I'm going to make sure nobody touched that store or they have to deal with me. That's street justice, and that's real. And the stores starting to see that dynamic happen, so more and more stores, more and more businesses are buying in. But as I bring Pastor over, here's the thing that was missing. The church is one of our biggest, he says problems. Okay, so he's a pastor, he could say that. I was going to say, problem. How can you be a pastor in a community and you don't know you have a couple doors down a domestic violence situation, woman's getting her tail whooped every weekend? How come you don't know that? How come you don't know the drug dealers in your own community? They sit on your church step and your deacons have to move them off. How come you're not gauging them? How come you just come in, jump in your car and run? When a drug dealer told me this, Major Russell, the pastors and the churches are no better than us. I said, man, you're going to have to explain that one to me. Well, they come into our community and set up shop. They don't live here. They take up all the space. They bleed our communities dry, taking all the resources out of our communities, and they don't give back. And they leave until they come back to set up shop again. That's what we do. I might have grew up in this community, but I don't live here anymore. I got me a nice house out in the burbs. I ain't going to tell you where it's at. And you know what? I come in because this is what I do. I bleed communities dry. And they do the exact same thing. And I began to share that with those pastors. And some of them got upset, but most of them began to break. Because how is it that you can't come out of your church? Because what we want to see is, and what I've begged them to do and almost forced them to do to an extent, is get out of your church. Be a church without walls. I've asked pastors, I need you to come and ride with my police officers because you don't even know, you don't have a clue what a police officer goes through and what's going on in your community. Ride with them if you're scared. And a beautiful dynamic started happening. One pastor stood up before all of them. He's done more than all of them. You're about to meet him, Pastor Don Campbell. He started riding 3, 4, 5 nights a week Community members are calling, I seen Pastor Don Campbell 3 o'clock in the morning riding in my community. He ain't single. He got his own family, but he's riding with my cops. And here's the thing I never expected. I'm going to let him tell his own story. Here's the thing I never expected. I didn't see this. I didn't see him making better cops. I knew that the cops that I had didn't know how to talk to the community, could learn from his people skills, but I never saw him affecting them in a personal way. I never saw him making their marriages tighter. I never saw him making their finances better. I never saw him counseling them. So he went from who was this spy riding in the car that Major got us with to we love Pastor Campbell, when he coming back. So I want you to just share with them for a few minutes, and then we'll get out of here.
Good afternoon. It's a privilege to be here and to share in this forum. As Major Russell has already mentioned, I work with him in the component of the churches in the transformation team. And as you can already surmise from what he said, I don't have a formal program that I'm doing. What I'm doing is more just grassroots relational things with people in the community and with the police officers. I was 11 years old when my dad brought our family to Baltimore to pastor. Pastored in the Waverly community, and we lived in the 4x4, which is at the lower end of Bel Air Edison. It's one of 3 communities in surrounding Clifton Park that contribute to almost a third of the violence that takes place in Baltimore City now. Back then, it was a very tight-knit community, very neat community. Old Irish couple lived next to us, behind us. There was a Polish grocer, and 2 doors over there was a butcher, and everybody knew each other, and it was a very, very neat community to live in. My dad brought us to Baltimore 4 months before the riots of 1968. And so the riots of 1968, which were taking place just a couple of blocks away on Gay Street and North, became my most vivid first memory of living in Baltimore. And it was back in about 2007 that I really began to recall those memories and began asking the question, why is my city still the way it is? And then the question of why, if we have so many churches in Baltimore, and we have an average of 1 church for every 300 people in Baltimore City, if we as pastors represent the redemptive heart and the redemptive purposes of God, why in the world have we not had any greater impact upon our city than what we have had? So one of the things I just began doing is just walking my city and praying, meeting people and talking to them. Had the opportunity then to begin to meet with then Commissioner Ham. And one of the things that he said after a meeting was, I'm at a church every Sunday, and most of those churches are full, but 6 days a week their doors are closed. If pastors would just get outside and engage with the people in the community, it would make a huge difference. He made contact for me with the major of the Northeastern District, who was then Major Rodriguez, and I met with him, and my question to him was, how can I serve you and your officers? And the first thing he said, if pastors would just get out of their churches and engage with the community, it would make a tremendous difference. And so that became a mandate for me. And I just began doing beyond what we had done before in terms of engaging with the people. I began to endeavor to live in the community on my feet with the people. And one of the things that I wondered was, why, if we've had so many investments and we've done so much to try and rectify problems in the community, have things stayed so much the same? And one of the things that we do as pastors, and I won't direct the attention to anyone else, but we're very good at identifying a problem and gathering a group of people together and creating a program or creating an event. We come in, we do something, and we expect to have affected lasting change. But we're dealing with systemic, lasting problems, and just bringing an event, bringing a program that has a duration is not going to be effective. And God's principle is a little bit different. Isaiah 62, God terms it in looking at a land that is desolate and a city that is deserted, that in order to bring transformation, he's going to give that land people who are married to the land. And you and I know what goes into the typical marriage vows, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness or in health, till death do us part. And that kind of commitment. So I really like Sarah's term here, relentless pursuit of people, that we don't let them go and we persist. And for me, it's no matter what it takes, I need to give my life to this. The interesting thing is, as Major Russell has mentioned, that I ride with the police a lot. Just last night, riding with the officer in charge of Sector 3 in the Eastern District, and we responded to a domestic violence call, and I have found this to be true with very few exceptions. A young lady was on the porch with her daughter, and the ex-boyfriend had the baby, and they'd had a confrontation, and the officers went in the house to speak with the male, and I began to talk to the girl. And when she found out I was a pastor, she began to break down and cry and said, "Please pray for me. I need help so bad." In the course of talking to her, "Do you know a pastor?" And she lives on a street where she could walk in any direction for 2 blocks and come across at least 10 churches. In prayer walking communities at Major Russell's request, whenever there's been a homicide in a community, and just being out there on a Sunday evening and talking to the residents who are sitting on their steps, and I'm Pastor Campbell, just walking through and praying for the community. You have anything that I could pray about with you? And yes, and share. And do you know a pastor? I don't know any pastors. Do you have a church that you go to? I don't. And so there's this support system that churches should offer. There's this ministry, there's this hope, there's this sense of future, redemptive purpose that God has specifically tasked us to bring, that we aren't accomplishing because we aren't engaging with the people that we need. One of the things that I identify about Jesus is that he spent more time outside the walls of any religious institution than he spent inside. There are tremendous opportunities to engage with people. And engaging with them from the perspective of, I'm married to this land, and I will be here until what God has in mind for these people has been accomplished. Gives you a sense of tremendous freedom to be where you are, to give your life to what you're doing, and to really enjoy it. And I've been astounded at the doors that God has opened for me. The people that I've talked to that I would have no opportunity to talk to otherwise, the drug dealers and people from one end of the economic spectrum to the other, that just by being engaged on my feet in the community, the doors have opened. Sir.
As Dr. Blum is coming real quick, this Saturday was one of our transformation team, which is nonprofit, coming up on a year. We have something where all of us come together, Hopkins, the churches, all of us, the residents, businesses. We do something called a Day of Hope. We do them in various green spaces in the district. So this Saturday we'll be at Darley Park, which is where 12-year-old Sean Johnson was killed sitting on his porch with 3 friends 2 years ago. Last year, Monet was shot and killed in the same community in her chest by some friends accidentally. And what we do is just give away. We have 12 moon bounces set up for kids. We have hot dogs we give away, face painting, haircuts, jobs. But it's just a plethora of things. And if you're not doing anything from 12:30 to 4:30, come up to, there's some flowers up here, come up and really experience how the district is transforming the lives of so many people.
Thank you, Major. Thank you, Pastor. And I think that you have had a bit of a glimpse of when I say there are extraordinary people in this community, what we mean by extraordinary people. The third program that I want to share with you in the time that we have left is a very special program, Newborn Holistic Ministries. So last year, the Urban Health Institute established the Henrietta Lacks Memorial Award for Outstanding Community University Partnership. And without going to a ton of detail, because we will show you the program in 1 minute, the Newborn Holistic Ministries was the recipient. Todd Marcus is the one of the directors and leaders of Newborn Holistic Ministries. He has been since the age of 19 when he came, I believe, to do carpentry work and help build physically the program, and now is the leader. So let's turn, is this the right thing to click onto? And to maximize it.
The neighborhood, it was like a worn, torn area. An area that you wouldn't think human beings would live.
I mean, I've been in Baltimore all my life in the Soundtown area.
Yeah, same here.
I watched it drop.
Deteriorate.
When we first started, I had already had a sister who had OD'd.
The things that really made community strong are what's being taken away from us.
The fierce commitment to this project has been what's sustained it.
All right, it's certainly a pleasure. It's about standing up for your community.
It's not a thing of you can just stop. We teach them how to quiet down the mind, shut the races in their head, and begin to start pondering over, looking at how did they get here.
They get a sense of what life is all about.
They're getting ready to leave. They complete the program next month.
Couldn't do it with my sister because I didn't understand, but I can do it with them.
The families that have been separated because of the addictions, they're now together.
Pennsylvania Avenue was once the mecca of African-American arts and entertainment. You know, you had the Royal Theater, the Sphinx, the Cotton Club, and folks were here and it was booming, and being able to see that we can do something together to make it a little bit better brings a little hope.
When we heard that we won this award, we just rejoiced.
Such an honor that Hopkins chose us.
I couldn't believe it.
I'd say that partnering with Bloomberg has really opened up new doors to us.
This is transforming people's lives. It's transforming the corner. It's transforming the way that faculty look at how you develop and sustain partnerships with the community.
This is a tremendous opportunity for us to grow the work that we're doing here and to see this kind of work on this corner spread to others across the city and the nation.
It's this feeling of success. We have succeeded in becoming better.
It's time that this organization be better known and that there be opportunities for further linkages with Hopkins.
To receive support with such great power, with such great depth as far as history is concerned, is powerful, very powerful.
Let me turn it to Todd Marcus.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the chance to talk with you a little bit. As you saw a little bit, our organization is called Newborn Holistic Ministries, and we are very much a community-based organization on the west side of town. We're right on Pennsylvania Avenue. And the reason I say we're so community-focused is because a lot of the things that you've been hearing the other speakers talk about the dynamics and the struggles here in Baltimore, things that you see around you as sure as you are out and about in town. These are challenges that we have dealt with for many years. Like many other communities, in Baltimore, ours was a segregated African-American community, which, in spite of the oppression of legal segregation, was a sustained, self-sustained community. We had our professionals and a complete community, the doctors, the lawyers, the politicians, the teachers. And it was after we had the riots after Martin Luther King's assassination that we lost a lot of our people. We lost a lot of those professionals. We always hear about our cities with white flight. Well, we had black flight from our communities. And so suddenly, between the physical destruction, between the out-migration of our professionals, our community became much poorer and less capable of fighting for itself than it had once been. You throw into the mix the drugs that have been an influx into our community, and that puts us into the challenge that we have been dealing with for many years. So one of the things that's so significant about our organization, I think, is that it is founded by a community resident, a lifelong community resident. You saw Elder C.W. Harris, our founder, in the video. You saw his wife, Miss Amelia Harris. And then you have other folks that have gotten in the mix that have relocated, like myself, that have been there for about 15 years now. And basically, we have very much taken this grassroots from the community up type approach. And I'm going to pull up just so you can see, you saw some of the pretty pictures and everything in the video, but so that you can see the way that it looked. I'm going to pull up a couple photos for you. I met Elder Harris in 1996 myself while I was volunteering with Sandtown Habitat for Humanity, one of our great partners in the area, in our neighborhood, that focuses on home ownership for our community residents, also does a school as an alternative to our challenged public school systems. And so one of the first things we did was, one day I was there to volunteer, the Habitat said, "There's no work for you." Elder Harris rolled up, said, "I'll put you to work." And we went down the street to this building that you see here. And that's what our whole intersection was like. Vacant, abandoned buildings, a major intersection for open-air drug dealing. For those of you familiar with Pennsylvania Avenue, you may know that it was once the mecca of arts and entertainment in Baltimore City. It was well-renowned for the Royal Theater. People all know the Apollo Theater in New York where entertainers come. Well, that was part of the circuit in our neighborhood. So to have this kind of gloried history left with intersection of abandoned buildings was quite a transformation. But for us, community-based organization, community residents, we started one building at a time. So this building here that you saw, Elder Harris, myself, hundreds of other volunteers, over a few years, we renovated it. And because there was nowhere in our community for women to overcome drug addiction, that was the vision that was born to make it Martha's Place, a recovery program for our women. And we have now both a 6-month transitional program as well as long-term phase for that program to help our women to address that challenge in our neighborhood. And you see the transformation. There's what it was, and here it is today. Well, I told you it was a whole intersection. Right across the street, you had more vacant homes. And so while we thought it was quite an accomplishment to get that first building done, we realized, okay, we got to turn and look across the street. And so we saw that, and we worked to renovate those, and that became the long-term phase for the women. Now, they were in our 6-month program. They needed somewhere to go afterwards. 6 months is not a long time. And so we created long-term housing, and that's what you see here across the street. So ladies come to us out of the detox programs, out of the prison system. They now have the chance to get a very structured recovery program with Martha's Place transitional phase, and then go into the long-term independent housing. The next thing was that here we had this building across the street and yet another corner. Another vacant, abandoned building was once a furniture store. And for us, the challenge was, okay, what are the needs of our neighborhood? Our mission is very much focused on meeting unmet neighborhood needs. And you heard about the major talk about how we have so many community organizations in Baltimore, but oftentimes they're in conflict, they're duplicating each other. Something that we really pride ourselves on is by being based in our community, being community residents, we know our other organizations. I mentioned Sandtown Habitat for Humanity working on housing. So similarly, we try not to duplicate what already exists. And in our case, we were already doing responsive work with Martha's Place at this point. Well, we thought, okay, what do we have in our resources and our capacity to do some preventative kind of work? And that's where the image and the vision for Jubilee Arts was born. And that's our second major program. That's classes in arts and ceramics, visual arts, dance, writing, you name it, and cultural opportunities as alternatives to the drugs and violence that are still so dominant on our street. And so that was the transformation of this building that allowed us to house that second major program for us. In addition to all these buildings, we had a tremendous number of vacant lots. I'm sure all of you have seen how many of our buildings have been knocked down in Baltimore City, creating these vacant lots, and we've not had, as a city, a plan of what to do with them. For us, this was a pressing thing that was right in our face, and so we began turning these vacant lots like you see here into beautiful community green spaces. These transformations, these beautiful places, green spaces, public murals like you see here. Similarly, vacant properties created from building knockdown turned into a memorial garden for lives lost to drugs in our community. So this has been a huge transformation for us, not only on the programmatic things that are needed to serve our community, but also for the beautification of our community. Now, I know we're running into the end of our time, so I encourage you to take a look at the handout that has been shared with you. We would love to have you get engaged with us in volunteering. We're community-based, as I shared. Volunteers have been a huge part of how we've been able to do so much with so little. Myself, I started as a volunteer, and I've stuck with our organization all of these years. We would love to have you part of that with us. You can see the website is newbornholisticministries.com, and we'd love to be in touch with you further. Thank you, everyone, very much.
We have materials for each of these three programs. There are numerous opportunities with these programs and across the city. Take advantage of it. And I want to thank our four presenters for what was an absolutely terrific session. Thank you very much.